Dr. Himanshu Rai. I'm glad to see you again. Nowadays it is City Pushkin, which is near St. Petersburg. This February you take interview with me, and now it is my choice to give interview with you.
Yeah, the tables are turned, Alexander.
Okay. I will give you several questions about you, about like your professional background, your view about Russian-Indian relationship, and of course it's really interesting for me, for our students, for our colleagues to describe you like a person. Okay.
Absolutely.
Our first question will be about, several questions will be about you. As far as we know, you trained a lot of great people, more than 40,000 people, and you have a like academical and corporate background. What kind of new invention you implemented during your training process? What kind of innovation do you implement?
So one of the things, Alexander, that I do, mostly I train people in negotiation. So I train the bureaucrats of our country and several corporate people in negotiation. One of the things that I try to do is I have something called a 3S framework of negotiation, which is negotiation skills, negotiation style, and negotiation strategy. So through several simulations, what we try to do is I try to build their negotiating ability, help them to understand their negotiation style, which is a natural reaction that they have, and then help them in identifying the appropriate strategy given the context that they are in. So I think what brings a newness and innovation into this training program is that we actually work together to understand the challenges that they are facing in terms of the conflicts. Number two, we try to build certain simulations through which we bring them as close as possible to real life situations. And number three, we also help them in reflecting on whatever it is that they have done, what they did right and what they did not so right, and therefore could possibly improve. So I think it's a combination of these three that actually helps people.
Okay, great. As far as I know, you also have a great, good professional experience in negotiation with really difficult situations. Like, could you describe this?
So, I have done negotiations, and I also teach complex negotiations. I have done negotiations in certain tricky situations, like negotiating with trade unions, negotiating in a property dispute where I am either shadow negotiating for somebody or I'm doing some kind of a mediation or an arbitration. So these are very, very challenging situations. There are certain other negotiations which I can't possibly talk about publicly, but these are complex negotiations for 2-3 reasons. One, because the context is something which is very, very unique. Two, the consequences of a poor outcome can actually be very, very dangerous at times. And the third thing is that there are multiple actors involved. And therefore, when you have more people, more issues, time constraint and criticality, then the complexity increases manifold. I enjoy doing those negotiations, though I wish that I do not actually get many opportunities to do such negotiations, because clearly the conflicts in these cases are very, very big.
Okay, thank you very much. As far as I know, you also really interested in philosophy, and you implement some philosophical concept in your study. How do you, especially in case of study of leadership, negotiations, and other your studies?
See, Alexander, I've always believed that philosophy and science, they go together. Science can teach you how to make better and better guns and how to make better and better medicines, but only philosophy will tell you when to use guns and when to use medicine. And therefore, I bring in philosophy in my elements of leadership for 2 reasons. One is that a leadership which does not have a moral compass or a sense of justice is incomplete leadership. And therefore, the moment I talk about ethics in leadership, I have to talk about the philosophical underpinnings of ethics. So whether I'm talking about a consequentialism theory, whether I'm talking about a utilitarianism theory, whether I'm talking about a deontologicalism theory, or whether I'm talking about the Upanishadic theory from our own Indian scriptures, these are the philosophies that help us in discriminating between right and wrong, and therefore making ethical decisions. So philosophy has to be an integral part of everything that I teach.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really deep approach. We see that nowadays there are a lot of conflicts. And as a researcher, how do you think, what will be the tendency? What kind of conflicts mostly interested for you like a researcher? And another part of his question is, what kind of new trends and form and transformation will provide it in negotiation procedures?
So, my personal interest is in geopolitical conflicts and, surprise, surprise, on the completely other hand, the conflict within one's own mind. So I look at these two extreme conditions. So if you look at geopolitics, there are conflicts between countries, there are conflicts between communities, there are conflicts between ideologies. And to help people sort out and resolve these conflicts is something that I try to do in my own little ways. And if I look at negotiation and how negotiation has progressed over the years, one of the things that I notice in most parts of the world is that we are bringing in professional negotiators who look at the process. So for example, one thing I always keep telling all my participants or anyone who asks me, in my own book on negotiation, published by McGraw-Hill, I have talked about it, that you have conflicts at 4 levels. One is the intrapersonal conflict, which is conflict within your own head. Unless you have resolved that, don't go and try to solve interpersonal conflict, which is conflict between people. And then, more often than not, when we do complex negotiations, for example, a geopolitical conflict, the first level of conflict that we need to resolve is the intra-group, which is within the group, which is the very collective that you are representing, whether that collective is a country, whether the collective is an ideology, whether that collective is a state or a city or a university for that matter. First resolve the conflict within that institution or that collective, and only then go and resolve what I call the intergroup conflicts. So I think the world is progressing towards that, and when I say world, I mean the world of negotiations. However, it's not progressing as quickly as I would want them to be, particularly when it comes to the geopolitical conflicts.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really not only interdisciplinary, but sometimes transdisciplinary approach to negotiation process.
Absolutely, all the time.
And I have several questions about you, like a leader of big organization, Indian Institute of Indore. It's one of the leading business school in India. And not only business, because I know that you also conducted a lot of social important projects which are important for Indore and another places in India, not only in India. I know that you are busy people, and but for a lot of managers in Russian corporations and in academic sphere too, it is a really great question how to define home from work, how to define urgent things which you have to do from important things. Do you have any concrete suggestions or methodics, approaches which are relevant for you, for example?
Yeah, Alexander, I don't think I'm the best person to answer that question, because in my case, the boundaries between my home and my work are completely blurred right now. And that's possibly because of the current role that I am doing. So as the director of the Indian Institute of Management Indore, I'm probably working 24 hours. My day starts it starts pretty early, but I start my work at 7 in the morning. So I have this, so some of the things that I can answer is that I make sure that I am usually not disturbed between 11 in the night to 7 in the morning. So I have this thing in my phone, which the app that automatically shuts the phone in terms of puts into the do not disturb mode at 11, and it switches it on only at 7 in the morning. So even though I may work beyond 11, at least I'm not looking at my phone, or at least I'm not trying to look at my phone unless I'm expecting some call or some such thing. Likewise, I start my day very early, but I make sure that I don't look at my phone before 7 p.m. However, despite the fact that in my case the boundaries are blurred, I even have a home office, I would recommend that people should actually keep those boundaries separated, those spaces separated, because home is something that you come back to. And therefore, I know it's very difficult. I mean, it's impossible not to bring your work home, but what I talk about is mindfulness. So for example, if a friend were to come and have a conversation with me, I will never look at the phone. I will not look at the work. And that to me is the key. Be mindful, which means be in the here and now. Whatever it is that you're doing, you focus on those things. And the other thing that you said about important things, what I do is actually schedule some of the important things I have to do, like calling my parents at least once a week or once in 10 days. So that is something that I put on schedule. If I have to call my friends, I put it on schedule. And one thing that I've done, and I think everyone should follow it, I do not sleep till I have exercised for 1 hour, read 10 pages of a book, and written 500 words, even if those words don't mean anything. So by bringing in this little element of discipline, I think I've managed to do things that I really love to do. And I think that is one suggestion that I would give to everyone. You don't have to do exactly these things. These are the things that I like to do. But whatever a person likes to do, you should bring that element of discipline in, that no matter what happens, you will not sleep till you spend 20 minutes in doing that, 10 minutes in doing that, half an hour in doing that, so on and so. So if you can manage to do that, I think you can manage your work and home life well.
Yes, I suppose you find the harmony between strong discipline and be a happy person.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
As far as I know, you're also interested in hiking and sometimes extreme sport like parachute jumping. Why do you prefer this kind of activities? How does it help for your professional development?
So it's both. I used to be afraid of heights, and there was one time in my life when I said, oh, I'm never going to go up, I'm never going to climb a mountain. And then I think 2 years later, I did some climbing. I went to the Himalayas, where I found my mountaineering guru, Bachendri Pal, the first Indian woman to climb Everest. And the first time I went to the Himalayas, I fell in love with the Himalayas. I knew that these are my spiritual abode, that I somehow belong there. And therefore, to me, the joy of trekking and climbing came through that, and it also helped me in finding the purpose of my life. I was working in the corporate world, and I decided to shift to the academic world, went back to school, went back to complete my PhD, and then get into teaching, all because of my trekking and climbing. And then, of course, I realized that while I may be afraid of heights, you have to go beyond your fear. And that is when I started doing other things. So I started with some parasailing, then I did the world's longest zip line. And 2 months back, I jumped off a plane from 13,000 feet and did my first skydive. And again, I've fallen in love with skydiving. So that's one thing that I'm going to do again and again.
Okay, I suppose that we can do together sometimes.
Absolutely. No, we have to do it together.
Okay, as far as I also know, you are interested in Sanskrit and you have a deep knowledge about it. But it is really difficult, especially for Indian people. Not all of them can do it like you. And you're also interested in yoga. How does these practices in Sanskrit, yoga practices, help you? Maybe it's useful for your professional development or for your personal development. Could you describe it, please?
They help me in both. So Sanskrit is something that I have inherited. I inherited it from a mother whose family comes from a family of Sanskrit scholars. My mother's grandfather, maternal grandfather, he used to be a Sanskrit scholar, and he used to conduct puja, etc. In a temple in what is now a city in a place in Pakistan. And from there I got my Sanskrit. Now Sanskrit has helped me in understanding the Indian or the Bharatiya scriptures. And in fact, I have used the knowledge of those scriptures both in my research on negotiation and when I talk about leadership. And when it comes to yoga, again, something that I have done right as a child. And you know, most people think yoga only in terms of exercises. So they talk about asanas, they talk about pranayama, the breath control, etc., etc. But yoga is actually a way of life. The word yoga, it means to join. And therefore, what we are talking about is joining the body, mind and the soul.
Oh, great.
And when you bring a balance between these three, that is when you reach a state where you are equanimous. So one thing, for example, that I have learned from my Sanskrit scriptures and from yoga is what I call nishkam karma, which means performing an action because it is the right action and because it is your duty, not because of what you will get out of that action.
Okay.
And that also makes me a little more detached. So once I have done my work, I don't look back to see as to what has happened with it. I know that I have put in my best, and whatever has to happen will happen for sure, because I have given whatever it is that I had to. And I think that is a philosophy that I have brought into my life, that if something is worth doing, it is worth doing well. You should give your 100%, you should put your best foot forward, and then try to do as best as you possibly can. So yoga helps me in staying grounded. My mountaineering helps me in keeping me humble, because when you look at those big mountains, particularly my Himalayas, I call them my Himalayas and my spiritual abode, you know how insignificant you are in the larger scheme of things. So I think the combination of these, the scriptural knowledge in Sanskrit, the yoga and my mountaineering, they help me both in my profession and my personality.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have nowadays we participated in International Partners Days of HSU University, and so several words and questions about internationalization like a process. I was surprised that when I firstly visited your institution, that you're open for world. Could you describe the process of internationalization of IIM Indore? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for your development, for your programs?
So the reason why at IIM Indore we focus on internationalization is because we believe that knowledge can be proprietary, but wisdom is not. And you can learn from everyone and everything. And there's no point in reinventing the wheel. So if there is some best practice happening somewhere, you don't have to reinvent it. You can simply pick it up, adapt it to your institution, and then go ahead with it. So we do our internationalization at multiple levels. One, of course, is the mobility of the students. So our students go to our international partners. Students from our international partner institutions come to us. We do faculty exchange, we do staff exchange. We try to learn from each other. We try to do some joint research projects. And now we are also launching joint certificate programs with our international partners. So we have launched something in global healthcare. We have launched something in sports management, in entrepreneurship, so on and so forth. And the idea is to build on the complementary skills of the two partner universities. And therefore, with HSE, once again, it's so beautiful to be here in St. Petersburg. Again, we're looking at exactly that. Russia and India have so much in common. And there's so many good things that you people do. There's so many good things that we do. And there's so many common challenges that we face. And therefore, if the two of us come together, exchange ideas, exchange thoughts, talk to people, bring them together, do some joint researches, etc., I'm sure we would be able to help each other.
So nowadays we have some ideas about future collaboration between IIM Indore and HSU University. But how do you think in the future, for example, in future 10 or 20 years, what kind of our collaboration will be? What kind of formats will be useful for our both institutions? What kind of research, educational activities will be useful for our faculties and for our students?
10 or 20 years is a very, very long time. But, Alexander, I'm glad that you have asked me this question, because it takes me back to what India and Russia mean to each other. See, we are old friends as countries. We are trusted allies. And therefore, we make sure that we are there for each other at all times. So in 10 to 20 years, I see HSE and IIM Indore actually solving some of the wicked problems, some of the big problems. So some of the big problems that we face in both the countries, and they're not going to go away very quickly. I think 10, 15 years, 10, 20 years is a good time zone, a good time period for us to be looking at those wicked problems, the problems of inequality, which is the difference in income between the rich and the poor, the gender inequality, the problems which are related to challenges that we face in terms of urban infrastructure and the rural areas, which have very different problems, and the challenges which are around environment. And in 10 to 20 years, I think the two of us together are going to solve some of these problems.
So, go further steps to this great future of both our institutions.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Such a pleasure, Alexander.
Thank you.